Welcome, everyone. I am Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice. Thank you so much for your attention and subscribing or participating in this channel. I want to provide a lot of value in this video as I talk about one federal prison mistake you should make. To be clear, when I film videos, to a degree, they're somewhat general in nature. And I say that because the advice that I give may not be applicable to you. I frequently say in my books and lectures on YouTube, you've got to use your own judgment, your own discretion to determine what's in the best interest of you and your family. And I want you to think a lot about that as I film this video. The idea for this video resulted from a conversation I just had with a former teammate of mine at USC. And we were discussing the life and legendary career of our former coach, Mike Gillespie, who unfortunately passed away last week at 80 years old. Tough coach. I remember leaving some practices my freshman year at USC in tears. I wasn't alone. He was tough. And the idea for this video, one federal prison mistake you should make, I'll open up with a story from a meeting I had with Coach Gillespie my freshman year at USC when I walked into his office and he said, "So Paperny, from Montclair College Prep, you and Brad Fulmer," it's my best friend who played in the big leagues for a long time. Brad and I were inseparable. And said, "Paperny, so what are your goals here? What are you hoping to accomplish at USC?" I said, "Coach, I just want to get my first hit in the inter-squad game tomorrow. And then I want to get my second hit." And he said, "That's a perfect answer." And I was like, "Oh, great, I gave the right answer. You're nervous as a freshman in your coach's office, right, with all these awards around you." So that's the perfect answer. Keep it up. The next day, I did get my first hit. I was jammed, a little shank to right center off of Ben Tucker off a hanging breaking ball. The reason that was so valuable in having that conversation with him, because to a degree, when I'm successful, that's the way I think. So how does this relate to you? And the only reason we're here and I'm teaching is to help you. Upon my surrender to federal prison, I began serving time with, of course, and interviewing men who had been in prison for very lengthy periods of time. And many of them had not established or hit upon these very massive, and in some cases, unattainable goals that they had identified upon their surrender to prison. So a federal prison mistake I think you should make is not establishing these huge and massive goals upon your surrender to prison. Again, if some of you are good with huge goal setting, good for you. For me, for many of the fine people with whom we work, hopefully you may want to take a different approach as we did, or as I did in that conversation with Mike Gillespie when I said, I don't want to be an All-American today. I wasn't focused on graduation today. I was focused on getting my first hit in the inter-squad game. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. Rather than making this mistake of establishing huge and unattainable goals that can be so overwhelming. So let's talk about what some of these massive goals could be if you take the time to write them down. You want to repair your reputation. It could take a long time. You may want to get fit. In my case, I was a fat, bloated slob before I went to prison. I shared the story of my final meal before surrendering. I ate at Carl's Jr. I must have had 4,000 calories. I mean, I was eating like I had a date with the electric chair. In fact, as we walked out of Carl's Jr. and I was stuffed, I grabbed like the 2 cookies for $2 and I asked my mom to give the guy $2. I didn't need them, I didn't want them, but I powered through so much. I wanted to show that I had the discipline to finish off more calories than cookies. You know, I was a slob, so certainly a goal was to get fit. Maybe that's a goal for you. Reputation, fitness, make your family proud, rebuild your career, get a new, whatever it may be. So I understand the goals, but in some cases, for me, maybe for you, they can be so unattainable, so far out in the future, it can be difficult to get started. And that's what I learned from a number of men in federal prison. They had established them. They had thought about these great grandiose goals, but they were so overwhelming they didn't know where to begin. So my suggestion is make the mistake, as some would tell you, make the mistake of not establishing these huge goals, but rather focus on what I think to be most relevant, reasons and habits. What are the reasons you want to take action and become successful in prison and afterwards? In my case, I didn't go to prison with a wife or a family. I'll acknowledge it was easier for me. Many of our clients have families, and it's more difficult to leave children at home. I have a 2- and a 6-year-old. It would be devastating to leave them. I see it differently now, 12 years and 1,000 clients later, many of them with parents, many of them with children. What is your reason? It's incredible what we may do for others, but we won't do it for ourselves. In my case, upon my surrender to prison, while I told everyone the right things of my reputation and my career, and I had these great goals, I never got started. It wasn't until I identified my reason. It was to make my parents proud, to let them know that their son could take a hit, a punch, and finally overcome, succeed in spite of it, succeed because of my own bad decision. My reason was to make my parents proud. to prove that I could overcome? What's your reason? That's something you should write down. So what I want to talk about in this video is breaking it down and then essentially writing it down. What can you do today, tomorrow, the next 20 minutes? So establish that reason. From there, we can begin to establish the appropriate habits. When I was in prison, Michael Santos taught this wonderful class. And in the class, he asked everyone in the room, he said, raise your hand if you want to write a book. And like everyone's hand went up. He said, raise your hand if you've actually written a book. All the hands went down, including mine. I'd been in about 2 months. He's like, well, why? Someone's like, well, a book is a big deal, man. I got the goal, but it's 500 pages and 50,000 words, and I've never really written before. And again, they had this massive goal. Make the mistake of saying you're going to write a 50,000 word book. Instead, focus on the appropriate habit. Can you write a page today? Even if a page feels so overwhelming, can you write a half a page? Even if a half a page today feels so overwhelming, can you pull out a pen and can you write down 3 sentences, 3 lines? 3 lines extrapolated over the next 6 months, you've got a little book. That's what you need to focus on. The reasons you want to take action, even if it's not for you, and then the habits you need to cultivate on a daily basis. And without feeling so overwhelmed about goals that are so far in the future, that sound great, and everyone wants to hear them, what are you doing today to cultivate the discipline and commitment and to form the appropriate habits? Let's talk about exercise for a moment. Right, so I went in this bloated slob, having consumed a 4,000 calorie meal in Taft, California that I didn't eat from Carl's Jr. I was sick, it was awful, terrible. I wanted to get in better shape. I told people I would, but to lose 40 pounds when I hadn't done it for 15 years, it sounded good. I was nowhere close, but I said it. Well, what was the next step? Eventually, within months, I was running 10 miles every day. You know what that first one was? I walked the track. Good God, I haven't walked a track in 10 years. I walked the track. Then I mustered the strength to run 3 miles, and it was brutal with shin splints and shoes that had holes that I had bought for a book of stamps. 3 miles, and then I felt great when it was over. And I said, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I'm going to do it again. And 3 miles became 4. It was daily. It was incremental. I was establishing the right habits. You've got to establish your values. So while I'm telling you to make this mistake of not establishing huge defined goals that are so far in the future, I do believe you should write down what your values are, along with the reasons. So if a value is fitness and the reason is to live longer, the next step is, well, what can I do? Maybe not even next week, not tomorrow. What can I do in the next 20 minutes? Can you go for a walk around the track? Even if you're home watching this, which if you have to go to prison, you are, unless you're watching this from an iPhone in prison. I get a lot of those messages too, as you should imagine. I always say, get rid of the iPhone. Call me when you come home. We'll talk about it. But I know some guys are walking the track in prison watching this. What can you do for the next 20 minutes? 10 minutes. And I share this with you because I tend to get overwhelmed, or I got overwhelmed with all I had to do in my life. You may be different. But I know a lot of the people with whom we work feel that way. Like, Justin, where do I start? I've written down these massive goals. It's a mistake. You've got to figure out the reason, and then you've got to identify the right habits behind it. And that's how you should serve your time in federal prison. And if you can do that, you will never be bored. Frequently, people will say, you're going to get beat up in prison. It's all sensationalized on television. Let me be very clear. My voice is going out a little bit. It's 10 o'clock here. I've been up since 4 and I'm on the phone. Forgive me. People will try to scare you into what life in federal prison is like. Let me be clear. The highest value in federal prison for many is boredom. Somehow trying to get through the day, somehow figuring out what they can do. They are so incredibly bored. And unfortunately, a number of people who have a sense of emptiness or can't plan or who can't create the habit will try to bring you into their routine. They may not have bad intentions, but they're bored. They're somewhat empty. They're looking to potentially to form a friendship. You've got to have the values. You've got to be cultivating the habits to have the resolve to say, I've got to stick to my routine. I've got to pursue my values. And rather than saying it's a 50,000 word book, I'm going to write a page today. And if that's too overwhelming, break it down to the next 20 minutes, 3 sentences. If you want to lose that 50 pounds, I'm going to say it again. I know some of my videos, I'm redundant. It's for a reason. Not always. Sometimes I've said it 4 times. I'm going live here. Break it down further and further and further and further into what can you do for the next 5 minutes and then build upon it. And by making those sorts of decisions, You'll have a productive prison term. You'll never be bored. And then the great thing is you will then actually be on your way to hitting all of these massive goals, whatever it is that's of value to you. So if it's a book, get to a point of you're writing a page a day, boom, you have a book. If it's losing the weight 2-3 miles a day, boom, you're fit. If it's making your family or your parents proud or your wife or your children proud, boom, they're going to see those daily incremental habits when you visit with them eventually when visitation opens, right? The irony is by establishing these habits and breaking them down and then writing them down, I believe breaking it down and then writing it down is crucial, because if you're writing it down, you're then in a position to examine your behavior. You're then in a position to identify what you've been doing. I have this journal that hangs in my office with lessons from prison and ethics and motion to the right. That is a shameless plug to get either books for free at White Collar Advice. But in between is my daily prison journal. And it hangs in my office. My wife got it for me as a gift. You'll see on one of the pages that'll show I broke down every lap I did while running. So you'll see 30 circles, and every time around was that lap. Well, that was fun. It was fantastic. When I embarked on my runs, I didn't say, oh my God, I got to do 10 to 15 miles to this. I'm going to do one lap and then another lap. Just like I did with Coach Gillespie when I met in his office my freshman year at USC, when he said, "So, Perperni from Montclair Prep, you and your sidekick Fulmer, what are your goals here at USC?" "Just want to get my first hit in inter squad, coach." Perfect answer. He said, "Keep it up, now get out of my office." Okay. Thank you all very much for subscribing to this channel. I hope you find value in this video. If it doesn't apply to you, that's okay. Maybe it'll make you think twice about your actions in prison. And of course, if it does apply to you, apply it, implement it. So the next time you're asked about what you hope to do in prison, rather than running off or going off about cliched, big, massive goals, say, I'm going to focus on the reasons that I want to prepare and cultivating the appropriate habits. That's the reason I'm going to hit all of these goals. Make that mistake in prison. If you do, you'll be more successful and happier on the other side. I'm very grateful for your attention. I'm rambling. It's what I do. I'm going to wrap it up now. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Any questions, feel free to schedule a call and get those books for free. Thank you. Bye-bye.